Good morning. Good morning. I'm Suzanne Zacour, Director of Legal Affairs for the National Association of Women and the Law, also known as NAL, en français, l'Association Nationale Femmes et Droits. Today, on behalf of a coalition of 50 women's organizations, and together with family members of recent femicide victims, we issue two urgent calls for action related to gun violence. The first call for action is to Prime Minister Trudeau and Public Safety Minister Leblanc. We urge your government to fulfill your responsibility to fully implement the provisions in Bill C-21, which amended the Firearms Act to address situations of domestic violence before the upcoming federal election. The second call for action is to the four other federal party leaders, Mr. Poilievre, Mr. Singh, Mr. Blanchette, and Ms. May. We call on you to meet with us and demonstrate strong leadership to address gender-based gun violence by publicly promising to include in your respective party platforms a commitment that you will fully implement, uphold, and enforce all new gun control measures in Bill C-21 to prevent the injury and murder of women and children by guns. Nous demandons au Premier ministre Trudeau et au ministre Leblanc de respecter leur responsabilité de mettre en œuvre les mesures contenues dans le projet de loi C-21 destiné à protéger les femmes de la violence conjugale. Nous demandons également aux autres chefs de parti de s'engager à maintenir les mesures contenues au projet de loi C-21 afin de protéger la sécurité des femmes et des enfants victimes de violences. NAL and our partners in the Women for Gun Control Coalition were pleased to see that most of our recommendations addressing gun violence in the domestic violence context were adopted into Bill C-21. The new domestic violence measures ensure that firearms licenses are revoked in two situations: where there are reasonable grounds to suspect that someone may have engaged in domestic violence or stalking, and when the licensee becomes subject to a protection order, such as an order not to come within a certain distance of their ex-partner. Also, once the new provisions are brought into force, a firearms license will not be issued to anyone who is either subject to a protection order or who has been convicted of an offense involving family violence. Although Bill C-21 received royal assent almost a year ago, on December 15, 2023, the provisions specifically addressing domestic violence have not yet been brought into force. Les mesures relatives à la violence conjugale dans le projet de loi C-21 empêcheront aux personnes qui sont sujettes à une ordonnance de protection ou qui ont commis des violences familiales d'obtenir ou de conserver un permis d'armes à feu. Nous attendons que ces mesures entrent en vigueur depuis bientôt 1 an. La protection des femmes victimes de l'épidémie de violence conjugale au Canada ne peut plus attendre. L'inaction du gouvernement met la vie de femmes et d'enfants en danger. As the next two speakers will attest, the delay in the implementation of the domestic violence provisions of Bill C-21 comes at the cost of the lives of women and children. Femicide and intimate partner violence must be treated like the epidemics that they are, and the government and all federal party leaders must act quickly to bring these measures into force and ensure their permanent and enduring enforcement.
Hello everyone, my name is Tara Graham and I live in Cochrane, Alberta. Never could I have imagined traveling to Ottawa to participate in a news conference on Parliament Hill, let alone to speak about intimate partner gun violence after my mom was murdered by her husband of 30 years. But here I am to speak for victims of gun violence who no longer have a voice because it was brutally taken from them. I'm here to speak for my mother, Brenda Tatlock Burke. Just 5 weeks ago, on October 18th, my mom's husband, Mike Burke, a retired RCMP officer, shot and killed her in their Enfield, Nova Scotia home before turning the gun on himself. Although it took just seconds to pull the trigger, the ripple effect of pain and loss from that heinous act will echo in our family for generations to come. My siblings and I lost our mother. She was a grandmother, a daughter, a sister, and a friend to so many who all lost her that day. Nearly 4 women every day are killed or severely injured by intimate partner violence, leaving scars on their loved ones. My mom had plans to tour the Cabot Trail this fall, plans to celebrate her 60th birthday next month, and planning her next visits out west with us. She had plans to finally start living her life for herself. My mom and Mike had been together for over 30 years. Many of these years involved manipulation, control, and other narcissistic behaviors from him. Things were only getting worse, and his anger and control escalated in her final days as she was preparing to leave the marriage. Recognizing these disturbing escalations in Mike's behavior, my sister and I voiced our deep concerns for her safety. But despite our instincts, our mom assured us she was fine and that he would not hurt her. I wish I could say that my mom's violent death at the hands of her husband is a unique one, and the pain of this tragedy is only our families to bear. But the fact is, intimate partner gun violence is a crisis across Canada. Clearly, we need to talk openly and unapologetically about intimate partner violence in this country and about the crisis of femicide and familicides. The situation is dire, and what happened to my mother highlights 2 critical gaps in gun control that may have prevented this tragic incident. First, we must enact all the new measures included in Bill C-21 aimed at protecting victims of domestic abuse against gun-related violence or threats of violence. These measures would ensure that domestic abusers do not have legal access to firearms. Under the new law, if police had been aware of the abuse, his firearms would have been removed from their home. Once the measures that specifically address domestic violence in Bill C-21 are implemented, this will become mandatory. And second, we must dispel the myth that physical harm is the sole mark of intimate partner violence. Educating both the police and the public to recognize coercive control as an equally damaging form of abuse is key. It would give victims of psychological and emotional abuse like my mother faith that reaching out to the police for help would be taken as seriously as a broken bone or a black eye. This underlines the urgency of adopting Bill C-332, now before the Senate, which makes exercising coercive control a criminal offense. The bottom line is that our elected officials have a responsibility to act now. I say to Prime Minister Trudeau, Mr. Poilievre, Mr. Singh, Mr. Blanchette, and Ms. May, with these measures, you have the ability to protect Canadians from gun violence. It's up to you to work together to ensure these laws are implemented before it's too late for future families, victims, and other communities. I speak today for my mother, Brenda Tatlock Burke, and for families like mine devastated by intimate partner violence. I speak today so no other Canadian will have to travel to Ottawa to plead with you, our politicians, for these common sense solutions.
Hello, my name is Brian Sweeney. Before you is a broken-hearted man. I am here today because my daughter Angie Sweeney was tragically shot and killed by her ex-boyfriend on October 23, 2023 in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. After he murdered my daughter, he drove to another home where he murdered his 3 young children. The children's mother was also wounded but survived. These murders are part of a large heartbreaking trend of femicide and familicide stemming from intimate partner gun violence in recent years, which has claimed the lives of women and children, devastated families, friends, and communities across Canada. Clearly, every month that goes by without these new laws being enforced in our cities, towns, and across rural and remote communities puts the lives of women and children at greater risk. Being here today is the best way I know to honor my daughter Angie's memory, as well as the young lives of the 3 children shot and killed by her ex-boyfriend. I can't bring my daughter back, but what I can do is use my grief and great sadness to help prevent other femicides. That's why my daughter's best friends and our broader community have started Angie's Angels, a nonprofit gun control advocacy group working to reduce intimate partner violence across Canada. The new laws need to be enforced now. They will help stop women and children from being murdered by domestic and intimate partner gun violence in their homes where they should be safe. In the coming federal election, we plan to be active and urge Canadians to vote for candidates who support these strong gun control measures and end domestic, intimate partner, and gender-based gun violence. Thank you for having me here today.
Good morning. I'm Myrna Dawson, Director of the Canadian Femicide Observatory for Justice and Accountability. Today, the Observatory begins its annual Remember Me campaign for more than 160 women and girls who have been killed so far in 2024. Yes, one woman or girl is killed every other day in our country. In 2024 so far, at least 22 women and girls were murdered by firearms for which weapon was disclosed. 7 children were murdered alongside their mother. Again, these are minimum estimates of femicide by firearms because much information remains pending for 2024. Since we began to document femicide in 2018, at least 219 women and girls have been murdered by firearms, one of the most common methods used by men to kill women, usually about 1/3 of the killings each year. Our work emphasizes the public health approach, which recognizes that the prevention of male violence against women and girls requires a combination of responses. Key among them is recognizing and responding to the role of firearms in the experiences of women living with domestic violence and those who die from male violence. Our government has done that, or almost. It is imperative the government moves on the implementation of all measures in C-21, including specific measures that address domestic and intimate partner gun violence. It is also imperative that in the coming election, all federal party leaders commit to upholding and fully enforcing these new, stronger gun control measures. Doing so will make all women safer, and some women in particular. For example, women in rural regions face disproportionate risk of femicide by firearms. Often their children and others are killed alongside them by men with firearms, and often with histories of domestic and intimate partner violence. Just a few of the examples in addition to what we have already heard. This year in October, in Huntsville, Ontario, a 52-year-old man contacted police saying he harmed 2 family members and had weapons in his possession. They also received another call about a shooting. Upon investigation, police discovered the bodies of 2 women and 1 man. Again this year, in August, in McCreary, Manitoba, a man shot his former intimate partner's family. His ex-partner escaped by hiding in the woods for more than 11 hours, but her mother, father, and brother were killed. There was a protection order against the killer. Despite this, he went to the residence of his ex-partner and used a firearm in his killings. This year, in June, in Harrow, Ontario, Carly Walsh and her 2 children, Madison and Hunter, died of gunshot wounds. Their husband and father died of self-inflicted gunshot wounds. This year, in Nova Scotia, Judith Organ, 74, was shot and killed. Her husband has been charged with first-degree murder. Every year since 2019, the year prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, we've witnessed an increase in the number of women and girls killed. 2024 is not looking any different, with the current figure moving beyond 2023. With one key difference. In 2023, 89% of the killings of women and girls involved male accused. This number has risen to 94% in 2024 so far. So the number of women and girls killed in Canada has not declined, and the proportion of male accused has increased. Many more women and children living with the threat of firearms are feeling like their sense of safety and hope for the future is damaged. For example, a study in rural New Brunswick and PEI found that 2/3 of the women whose homes had firearms said knowing they were present made them more fearful for their safety. Similarly, an Alberta study shows that for many women, firearm-related assaults were central to their experiences of domestic violence, including both direct and indirect threats to harm or kill them or their children. Moving on implementation of all measures of C-21 that address intimate partner and domestic violence, and committing to uphold implementation of all the new measures in this legislation is the very least that Prime Minister Trudeau, Mr. Poilievre, Mr. Singh, Mr. Blanchett, and Ms. May can and must do. Thank you.
We will now hear from Nathalie Provost, who's joining us remotely.
Bonjour tout le monde. Hi, I'm sorry I cannot be with you in person. I am in Alberta for the launch of the ROSE campaign, the YWCA Edmonton's annual initiative to end gender-based violence and honor the memory of the 14 women who were murdered in the École Polytechnique femicide. It's been almost 18 months since the release of the Mass Casualty Commission's final report into April 2020. Mass shooting in Nova Scotia that left 22 people dead. The Commission inquiry recommended stronger measures but be put in place to prevent gun possession by people involved in domestic or gender-based violence. As Mrs. Dacour has highlighted, Bill C-21 did a good job responding to these recommendations by enhancing license revocation, provisions to help protect those in danger from firearm violence. So it is with anger and frustration that today we must sound the alarm regarding the fact that the implementation of these potentially life-saving measures are still pending. Moreover, no timelines for when this work will be completed have been communicated by Public Safety Canada to the RCMP and other policing services, to women who lives with the fear that their spouse or ex-intimate partner will use the legal or illegal guns they own to kill them, to the family members and friends of victims of domestic abuse and gender-based violence, to stakeholders in the gender-based violence sector, working like Angie Sweeney, Brenda Tatlock-Burke, Judith Organ, Esther Jones, Carly Wash and her children, Madison and Hunter. Most Canadians support measures to address domestic gun violence, a ban on sale and guns, a ban on large capacity magazine, and mandatory buyback for complete for all high-powered assault-style weapons designed for military use, not hunting. And all Canadians have every right to respect their politicians to expect their politicians to act with urgency to keep our homes, schools, and communities safer from gun violence. And to those who listen to Mr. Poilievre, Mr. Poilievre never speaks about domestic violence. He thinks we are speaking about gun because we are against gun owner. We are not. We are for Canadian, for women, for children's safety. That's what our fight is about. And we need that Mr. Poilievre understand that, and I'm sure he is, we love our mothers, wives, companions, sisters, and daughters. And if we like them, we will consider that the issue with gun is not with criminal guns. It's with legal gun owners that have issues, and we must protect our families. I am a victim of a femicide. I was shot by a legal gun owner. And I think we have to listen to those women, to those men who believe that we have to do something. And again, in French, if I may, ça fait plus de 18 mois que le rapport de la commission sur ce qui s'est passé en Nouvelle-Écosse a été produit. Dans ce rapport, il est très clair que le gouvernement doit mettre des mesures pour protéger la violence domestique, la violence contre les femmes et les enfants. Les chiffres que nous ont présentés aujourd'hui Mme Zacour et Mme Dawson sont très, très clairs. il y a encore beaucoup de travail à faire et on doit aller jusqu'au bout pour implanter ce qu'il y a de bien dans la loi C-21. Ce n'est pas suffisant. Et il faut arrêter de penser que l'enjeu avec les armes, et ce sont seulement les armes militaires. Il y a des dangers reliés aux armes légales et possédées et il faut que des mesures soient prises, celles promises dans C-21. On s'y attend et il faut que ça cesse. J'ai 2 filles, j'aurai probablement des petites filles. Mes fils aimeront des femmes et je souhaite qu'ils vivent dans un Canada où les féminicides diminuent et arrêtent. Et pourtant, on vit dans une société difficile et pas clair du tout que la société va être plus simple. Donc, on doit agir pour se protéger. Nous voulons un Canada où nous pouvons vivre en paix et en sécurité. Merci.
Thank you. We will now take questions if there are any, and I want to note that we also have Heidi Ratchen from Police se souvient to answer questions.
Nous allons maintenant prendre une question en ligne. We will now take a question on Zoom. Émilie Bergeron, la parole est à vous.
Oui, bonjour, vous m'entendez bien? OK. Premièrement, est-ce que vous avez parlé à des représentants du gouvernement et qu'est-ce qu'ils vous ont donné comme argument pour que certaines des mesures ne soient pas encore en vigueur?
Merci pour la question. On a eu des conversations avec le gouvernement, mais on vous invite à adresser la question de pourquoi ces délais continuent après près d'1 an au gouvernement qui a la responsabilité de mettre en œuvre ces mesures qui ont été votées démocratiquement par les 2 chambres.
Et concernant celles qui sont déjà en vigueur, est-ce qu'elles ont un effet selon vous et pourquoi c'est urgent d'avoir toutes les mesures, donc d'avoir celles qui ne sont pas en vigueur aussi?
Alors, le projet de loi C-21 avait plusieurs mesures importantes de sens commun, importantes pour améliorer la sécurité et le contrôle des armes à feu au Canada. Les mesures concernant la violence conjugale sont spécifiquement celles qui ne sont pas encore entrées en vigueur. Donc, c'est absolument urgent que ces mesures entrent en vigueur parce que, comme on l'a entendu, il en est question de la vie et de la sécurité des femmes et des enfants. Et on pense que le gouvernement devrait prioriser ces mesures et non pas les laisser flotter et qu'1 an plus tard, avec un projet de loi qui a quand même pris 1 an et demi à adopter et qui n'était pas une surprise, qui est un projet de loi gouvernemental, on ne s'explique pas que ces mesures soient toujours pas en vigueur.
Merci. C'est ce qui conclut la conférence de presse. Thank you. This concludes the press conference.
Thank you.